My daughter-in-law smirked at me across the dining room table the morning after we buried my wife, and I swear it took everything I had not to walk out of my own house right then and there. She didn't even try to hide it. She sat there in Marion's chair, my wife's chair, the one with the little worn patch on the armrest where Marion used to rest her elbow while she read, and she folded her hands on the table like she was chairing a board meeting instead of sitting in the home where my wife had lived for 38 years. "We should talk about the estate," she said. "Not I'm so sorry for your loss. Not how are you holding up, Dad. Just, we should talk about the estate." The day after the funeral, while the flowers people had sent were still sitting in vases on the kitchen counter. I want to back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand what Marion was to me. We met in 1984 at a laundromat in Columbus, Ohio. I was 26 years old, broke, working double shifts at a shipping warehouse, and I had accidentally put a red sock in with my whites. Marion was sitting across from me reading a Patricia Cornwell novel, and she looked at my pile of pink undershirts and said, without missing a beat, "That's a bold fashion choice." I married her 11 months later. We had 39 years together. One son, Cody. A house we bought for $94,000 in 1991 that we slowly, room by room, turned into something that felt like us. Marion taught 3rd grade for 22 years. I drove a delivery route until my knees gave out, then got my CDL and drove long haul until I could afford to retire at 62. We weren't rich people. We were careful people. We clipped coupons. We took road trips instead of flying. We celebrated anniversaries at the same Italian place on Henderson Road every single year because the owner knew our order by heart. Marion was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in the spring of 2021, stage 3. She went through surgery and chemo and radiation and every single thing her oncologist recommended. And she did it with a kind of quiet stubbornness that I can only describe as pure Marion. She didn't complain. She lost her hair and made jokes about it. She got tired in a way that scared me and pretended she was fine so I wouldn't worry. She passed on a Tuesday in February, 8 months after her last clean scan. The cancer had come back. She was gone in 6 weeks. I didn't know how to exist without her. That's the honest truth. After 39 years, I didn't know which side of the bed was mine anymore. I'd stand in the grocery store and reach for the brand of coffee she liked before remembering there was no reason to anymore. So when my son suggested I might want to start thinking practically about the house and finances, I thought he was trying to help. I thought he was being a good son. Cody had married his wife, Deanna, 4 years earlier, and I'd always felt something a little off about her. The way she never quite looked at Marion when Marion was talking, the way she'd redirect conversations back to herself. But I'd kept those thoughts to myself because Cody loved her, and Marion always said to let grown children make their own choices. I should have said something. I know that now. The estate meeting, as Deanna called it, was held in my own dining room 12 days after Marion's funeral. Cody sat next to his wife. Marion's sister Ruth drove up from Cincinnati. Our family attorney, a man named Bill Parsons who'd done our wills and taxes for 15 years, sat at the end of the table with a manila folder in front of him. I thought I knew what was in that folder. I was wrong. Bill read through the document carefully. Marion had updated her will 8 months before she died. I hadn't known about that. She'd done it alone, during one of the weeks when I was helping my brother move to a smaller apartment in Dayton. The will was legally sound. Bill confirmed it 3 times before he finished reading. Marion left the house to me, the car to me, the small savings account we'd built together, $31,000, split evenly between me and Ruth. And to our son Cody, Marion left one item, her old winter coat, a dark green wool peacoat she'd had since the early 90s. Cody and Deanna hadn't touched it after the reading. It was still hanging on the hook by the back door. The moment Bill finished reading, Deanna laughed. Not a small laugh, not an uncomfortable, nervous laugh, a real one. She covered her mouth with her hand, but her shoulders were shaking, and she looked at Cody with this expression I can only describe as triumphant, like something had just been confirmed for her. "A coat," she said. She left him a coat. Cody at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Deanna, no, She pressed her lips together and composed herself. "I'm sorry, I'm just surprised. I thought the update to the will would reflect. I mean, we've been talking about this for months. That stopped me cold." "What do you mean talking about this?" I said. Deanna looked at me with an expression that was almost pitying. "We spoke with Marion about the house," she said. "About what would make the most sense for everyone going forward. The market in this neighborhood is really strong right now, and with just the 2 of you, just you, I mean, a 4-bedroom house doesn't make a lot of practical sense." I looked at my son, Cody. He was looking at the table. "We thought," Deanna continued, smoothing the front of her shirt, like she was giving a presentation, that Marion would leave things structured so the house could be sold and the proceeds divided. That would give you something to live on comfortably and give us the capital to finally invest in the property in Westerville. Property in Westerville. That was the first I'd heard of any property in Westerville. Marion didn't agree to that, Ruth said quietly from the end of the table. Clearly, Deanna said, and there was an edge in her voice now. But we had an understanding. Bill Parsons cleared his throat. The will is unambiguous, he said. There's nothing here I can interpret differently. What Marion put in writing is what Marion intended. Deanna's expression shifted. She wasn't laughing anymore. We'll want to consult our own attorney, she said. There may be grounds to challenge the update, if Marion was. If her mental state during treatment affected her judgment. The word incompetent floated unspoken in the air between us. I stood up from the table. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I didn't. I walked to the back door, took Marion's coat off the hook, and I carried it upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed, and I held that coat in my lap for a long time. It smelled faintly of her perfume, the cedar sachets she kept in the closet. The wool was worn soft at the cuffs. There was a small mend near the left pocket, where she'd caught it on a fence post years ago, and I'd sewn it back because she wouldn't let me throw it out. I don't know what made me check the lining. Maybe I was just looking for something of hers to hold on to. Maybe some part of me had already begun to understand something I wasn't ready to admit yet. I pressed my hands along the inside of the coat, smoothing it the way you do when you're looking for your keys in a pocket, and my fingers found something along the bottom hem. A thickness that wasn't just seam and interfacing, something flat and deliberate, sewn in carefully along the entire bottom edge. I got up and found Marion's small sewing scissors in her nightstand, where she always kept them. I cut the stitches slowly, my hands not quite steady. Inside the lining, folded into thirds and sealed in plastic, was an envelope. Inside the envelope was a letter in Marion's handwriting, and underneath the letter, a document I didn't understand at first. A statement from a financial institution I didn't recognize, with a logo I'd never seen and an account number I'd never known existed. The balance on that statement was $2.3 million. I read the letter first. I read it 4 times before I understood it. If you're reading this, then the coat did its job, she wrote. I'm sorry I kept secrets from you. I kept this one because I didn't know who else might go looking, and I couldn't risk it. Marion explained in that letter, in her precise 3rd-grade teacher handwriting, what she had figured out about our daughter-in-law 9 months before she died. Deanna had been pressuring her. Marion described it carefully, the way she described everything. Deanna had begun calling her alone, without Cody, starting about a year into the marriage. Calls were always friendly, always framed as concern. Mom, we just want to make sure you and Dad are taken care of. Mom, have you thought about what happens to the house? Mom, Cody worries about the burden on Dad. Marion said she'd initially appreciated what felt like genuine care. But the calls kept coming, and they started to shift. Deanna began dropping in references to attorneys, to Medicaid planning, to what typically happens when an aging couple holds on to a large asset. She suggested, gently and then less gently, that it might be simpler for everyone if Marion restructured how assets would be distributed. She used the word burden a lot. She used the phrase, you don't want to leave a mess, more than once. Marion didn't say anything to me because she didn't want to put me in the middle. She knew I loved my son. She knew it would hurt me to know what Deanna was doing. And she was sick. She had enough to manage. But Marion was not a woman who let things go unaddressed. She'd talked to Bill Parsons on her own. She'd asked him what her options were. And she'd asked him one other question, whether there was any way Deanna, if she challenged the will, could make a credible claim that Marion had been mentally incompetent. Bill had said the standard was very high, but that documentation helped. So Marion documented everything. Every phone call from Deanna she wrote down, date, time, what was said. She kept a notebook, 41 entries over 16 months, and the $2.3 million. I hadn't known about it. That was the hardest thing to sit with. Not that Marion had kept money from me, but that she'd felt she had to. She'd been quietly, carefully investing a portion of her teacher's pension for over 2 decades, through a financial advisor she'd started working with when Cody was in high school. Small amounts at first, then larger as her pension grew. She'd never touched principal, she'd let it compound. By the time she died, it had grown to just over $2,300,000. She had not told me because she'd been afraid, not of me, but of what might happen if others knew. Her father had died without a will when she was 12, and she'd watched her family's small savings get eaten up in legal disputes and family fighting. It had shaped her in ways she never entirely shook. She believed, as she wrote in the letter, that money only stays safe if the people who want it don't know it exists. She'd intended to tell me when the time was right, she wrote. She'd just run out of time. Don't be angry with me, she wrote near the end. Be smart, call Bill first, then find someone Deanna doesn't know. I called Bill that same evening. He was quiet for a long time after I told him about the letter and the account statement. Then he said, well, Marion was thorough. He advised me to contact the financial institution immediately and have the account transferred according to Marion's instructions, which she'd filed with the advisor years earlier. He also said that if Deanna proceeded with any attempt to challenge the will on grounds of incompetence, the 41-entry notebook Marion had kept would be extraordinarily useful, both for demonstrating Marion's mental clarity and for raising questions about Deanna's conduct. I followed every piece of advice Marion had left me. I also did something Marion hadn't told me to do, because I needed to understand the full picture before I decided anything else. I drove to West Irville. Deanna had mentioned a property, a casual reference, said like I would know what she was talking about. I didn't, but I wrote it down, and a property is a public record. It took me 2 hours on the county auditor's website to find it. A 2.8-acre parcel on the edge of Westerville, purchased 14 months earlier for $340,000. The deed listed one owner, not Cody and Deanna, just Deanna. Cody's name was not on it. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't confront Deanna. I didn't call Cody. I talked to Bill, and then I talked to another attorney, a younger woman named Ann Sherwood, who specialized in estate litigation and family financial fraud, and I told both of them everything I knew. Ann was direct in the way that good attorneys are direct. She said that what I was describing, an adult child spouse systematically pressuring an elderly woman with terminal cancer to restructure her estate, potentially for personal financial gain, with assets the marital partner was unaware of, was something law enforcement would be interested in. She said the word fraud carefully and specifically. We don't know enough yet, she said, but the pattern is there. She helped me file a report with the county prosecutor's office. I handed over Marion's notebook, the original with the dates and the quotes, and Marion's neat, careful handwriting. I handed over the property records. I talked to Cody's bank with Ann's help about whether there were joint accounts Deanna might have been moving money through without his knowledge. There were. Over a period of 2.5 years, Deanna had transferred approximately $87,000 from accounts she shared with my son into accounts held solely in her name. Some of those transfers were small enough to avoid triggering bank reporting thresholds. The pattern was deliberate. Cody didn't know. That was the conversation I'd been dreading since the night I found the letter. I drove to their house on a Thursday evening, alone. I sat at their kitchen table with copies of everything Ann had helped me put together. I watched my son's face as he went through the documents. I watched the moment he stopped looking confused and started looking sick. He said, "How long has this been going on?" "At least 2.5 years, I said, "maybe longer." He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "She told me the Westerville property was an investment she'd made before we met, that we'd both benefit from it eventually. Your name isn't on the deed," I said. He knew. I could see from his face that somewhere underneath everything he had already suspected things he hadn't let himself examine too closely. Deanna was at her sister's that evening. Cody called Ann from my phone. The prosecutors moved faster than I expected. The financial transfers were clearly documented. The amounts were significant, and Marion's notebook provided what Ann called extraordinary context for Deanna's intent. The pressure campaign on a terminally ill woman to restructure her estate, combined with the undisclosed financial accounts and the hidden property, built a case that the prosecutor described as more complete than most of what we see. Deanna was charged with financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, wire fraud, and theft by deception. She was arrested on a Wednesday morning. I didn't watch the news coverage. I didn't need to. She pleaded guilty 7 months later, sentenced to 6 years in a state correctional facility, ordered to make full restitution to Cody from the accounts and property held in her name. My son filed for divorce from his jail cell. The Westerville property, when it sold, went entirely to him. I kept the coat. I had it cleaned and I hung it back in the closet, not where Marion used to keep it, but in a spot where I walk past it every day. I look at it the way you look at something that holds a lot of meaning and a little grief all at once. Marion wasn't perfect. She kept things from me that I wish she'd trusted me with, and I've had to make my peace with that, with the knowledge that her silence came from love and fear in equal parts, not from distance. She was protecting me the only way she knew how. She was still teaching me things right up until the end the way she always had. The $2.3 million sits in a managed account now. Bill helped me set it up properly. I've paid off the house. I've set aside money for Cody for the kind of fresh start he's going to need. I gave Ruth a portion for no reason, other than that Marion loved her and would have wanted her to have it. And because Ruth sat at that table the day of the estate meeting and said Marion didn't agree to that when she didn't have to say anything at all. I still drive out sometimes on Sunday mornings. Not anywhere specific. I just get in the car and go. The way Marion and I used to on Sunday afternoons when Cody was young and the weather was good, and there was nothing particular we needed to do. I'd drive and she'd read out loud from whatever book she had. She was always reading. And sometimes I'd listen, and sometimes I'd just let her voice be there in the car with me, the way a familiar radio station is there, steady and present and exactly where you left it. Those are the drives I miss most, but I keep going on them anyway because she would have told me to. She would have said, in that Marion way of hers, that sitting still and waiting to feel better is not a plan. She was almost always right. And she was, as it turned out, a great deal smarter than anyone in that dining room gave her credit for, including me.